I've definitely joked in the past that it was like, oh, like cishets like really want an identity so badly, and they'd like just create these like random ones based on what they like to do. And so like and being a gamer is like very, very similar to that.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every 3 weeks, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss one of the games that made them and changed them, and all the feelings that they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronoun she, her.
And I am your co-host, Spencer, they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. So pull up that armchair. You can lie down on your couch. We're going to talk about some feelings.
On your
Spencer.
floor.
Oh, yeah.
If
you can lay down on your
having
floor.
acute back pain like me, you can lay on the floor or
go.
the nearest foam roller.
Yeah. Love a foam roller. How are you feeling about video games today, Spencer?
At the beginning of the pandemic, I feel like I and like a lot of other people was just sort of like in autopilot. Like I feel like I actually Persona 5 Royal had just come out. So like I honestly feel like the first like 6 weeks of the pandemic, I was just not present. I was just like Akira or Ren, I guess, depending on who you believe. I think lately, like this week in particular, the whole lockdown and everything has just been hitting me pretty hard. A friend of mine sent me an article from the Elemental blog on Medium, and it's about surge capacity, and essentially the idea is that human surge capacity. This was a term coined by a psychologist named Dr. Ann Maston. Surge capacity is a collection of adaptive systems, mental and physical, that humans draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations such as natural disasters. And the idea is that it keeps you going, keeps you stable, keeps you able to take care of your shit, handle your shit if you're going through like a really acute disaster. And this pandemic certainly felt that way in the beginning, but now it very much feels like it's stretching on indefinitely. And I've found myself sinking into this just sort of aimless depression and grief, I guess would be the easiest way to describe it. I also had just finished up Ghost of Tsushima early last week, and it definitely left me in an emotionally fragile place. And I just didn't really have much energy to do anything, think about anything. Like sometimes when I'm really, really depressed, I find that like even playing a game, like if I'm not doing well, like it just like makes me feel worse about myself. And it just kind of got me thinking, like at work, we've been doing these like really, really cool and really important like working groups. We call it a book club. And essentially it's a mix of folks, white, non-white, Black folks as well. And we're all coworkers. And we come to these sessions to just like talk about ideas together and talk about like anti-racist work. And when we were in this working group, something that one of my colleagues brought up is that as a white cis woman, she would often growing up hear this voice in her head telling her like, I'm different from other girls because I'm into sports. I'm different from other girls because like those girls only care about boys and makeup. And I think that there are different ways that these voices work and operate in our own heads as agents of white supremacy, of fat phobia, of racism, ableism, all these other things. Like even when we are working our hardest to dismantle these structures in our personal lives and our relationships, there's still this fight that we have to have in our own minds. And the way that we move past that is by forming connections with others. Like there's something so powerful just in turning to another person and having them see you and validate you. And we started talking about how, you know, like for me as a queer trans person growing up, like I didn't come out until I was in my early mid 20s, just because I had never seen another trans person, another Asian queer person in my hometown. That was not what surrounded me, and I didn't even have the words to articulate like what I was. And the first time that another you know, queer trans person of color looked at me and said, "No, you are real because I can relate to what you're going through," like that made me feel like I could escape you know, what those voices were telling me, the boxes they were putting me in. And so, you know, I think that these systems of oppression are designed to keep us separated, to turn us against each other, so that we don't have the capacity to form new ways of thinking by finding other people who would agree with us. And so, you know, really, community is the most powerful tool we have to push back on these systems of oppression. Like we build that by opening ourselves to others. And so, to relate this back to video games, basically what it got me thinking about was how in games it almost in a lot of ways would have you believe the opposite. Like a lot of games, you are this chosen one, and the world just revolves around you, and the actions that you take have ripple effects that go all the way up to the top. Like really, you are the master of the universe, and also like you are so powerful that you, like, sure, you need NPCs in that like they can help you get to another level, or like an interaction with them unlocks something, but it's very rare that like you utterly depend on another non-playable character in the game to complete that game. Like I think that in some ways games can sort of reinforce this fallacy that, like, you know, individualism, exceptionalism is the norm. It just got me thinking about that. I don't think every game is like that, but it did just make me think about how there is this emphasis on like being the chosen one, and often like I find that as I've gotten older, like I think when I was a kid, just trying to get to like when my goal was adulthood and being free of, you know, abuse, trauma, whatever. Like I very much felt like this tragic hero forging my own path alone. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's the friendships that I have that are the most important thing to me. Like I guess I thought as a teen and stuff, like I just need my own house, my own life, my own space. I just want to be alone. And now I think the pandemic has just really brought into sharp focus like how the most important things to me in my life are the connections I have with other people. And if I didn't have friends like you and others, like I would be nowhere. Like what's the point of having anything if you don't have anyone to share it with? Anyway, I guess I've been having like an emotional week. I was pretty depressed. I was playing Spiritfarer, and it was definitely soothing me in the spirit. It's been a nice tonic following Ghost of Tsushima. But anyway, enough about me and the things I should be talking to with my therapist instead. How are you? What have you been playing?
Well, this is pixel therapy, so that is what we're here to do.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So I've continued to be playing Tell Me Why, which is the episodic narrative game from Don't Nod, the same developer who did the first 2 seasons of Life is Strange. And Tell Me Why is very much in the same vein as the Life is Strange games. It doesn't have the Life is Strange name on it, the branding on it, but I think it's very much a continuation of what they were doing with the Life is Strange series. And the third and final episode came out on Thursday, and I actually finished that this morning. And I think I'm still processing what I ultimately think and feel about this game. I was looking at reviews. It's got a 79% on Metacritic, which is pretty comparable to Life is Strange Season 2. But I just kind of left the game not feeling like it had the same kind of emotional impact on me that Season 2 of Life is Strange did, or even season 1 to some extent. And I've been trying to figure out exactly why that is. There's so much that I like about what the game is trying to do. I just don't know if it succeeds at it. It takes a really interesting angle on things that I think I like in theory, but not in practice. So I can elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, the game is telling this. I guess if you don't want to know anything about, tell me why is a narrative game. The narrative is the most important part of it. So if you don't want to know anything about the narrative of this game and you haven't played it, I would definitely check out now for a little bit, because I'm not going to be spoiling major details of the game, but I'm going to be kind of talking about the overarching narrative. So anyway, we talked about this a bit in our last episode, but the game does center on 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. The brother is a trans man. When they were children, they experienced a pretty severe trauma in which their mother attacked the brother and was subsequently killed. And the brother went to a juvenile detention center for 10 years to serve time for the murder of the mother. The game is the 2 siblings reconnecting now, a decade after this incident, and they're actually cleaning out the house that they grew up in with their mother. And they're, going through her things, going through old memories in the past. They realize in the process that they have the ability to share memories. They can revisit memories and watch them again from each other's perspectives. They also, as children, had the ability to talk to each other in their heads through this sort of magical spiritual voice connection. And that's able to rekindle as they've reconnected now in their early to mid 20s, I think they're supposed to be. So it's got this like really, I don't know, it's like if nostalgia is quite the right word, but like you're going through your childhood home and nothing's really been touched in a decade, and you're kind of picking apart all these memories, and you're looking back at your childhood through this new lens, and you're trying to figure out why did the mom attack? Why did this trauma happen to us? Why are we in the situation that we are now? Why do we have this ability to talk to each other in our heads? And that's how that all kind of ties back into the narrative. And there's something really, I think, grounded there, and something really interesting to pick at about how as we become adults and we look back at our childhood, how we reanalyze those memories and recontextualize those memories, and how it changes our perspective on the experiences that we had as a child. Because when you're a child, there's just so much that you can't understand, but a lot of it gets stuck in there and you remember it, and then you look back on it when you're older, and it all, you kind of have to like piece it back together and figure out how to make sense of it. And this personal mystery that they're unraveling over the 3 episodes of the game, it all kind of, I like that it, so much of it, even though you're trying to, there's these reveal moments, right? There's these aha moments, but the aha moment never feels as much of what the like emotional tension of the game is hinging on as it does of, now what are you going to do with that aha moment? So you've learned a thing about this character and what they did when you were a child. Now you have to decide if you're going to forgive them or if you're going to condemn them for those actions. And that's what the game is hinging on. Like your choice there.
So
or at least
like,
that's what it... Oh,
are you literally condemning? Like what happens if you condemn someone?
And this is where I think the game falls flat, because it both doesn't give you the time. You learn the information and then are immediately asked to forgive or condemn.
Oh, jeez.
And regardless of your decision, it doesn't seem to have a real impact on the game. So you're not given time to process. You're not given time to sit with what the information that you've learned. And then you can make a decision, but it ultimately feels a little hollow because I didn't have any time to process it. I'm being asked to make this decision before I've really had time to think about it. And I ended up forgiving a lot of people, but it was because like I saw that as being like the avenue that I would have worked towards, right? Like I would want to forgive this person for what they did because I can see ultimately why they made the choices that they made. However, in this very moment, I'm not ready to make that decision.
Right.
So when I tell the character, when I click the button to have the character say, I forgive you and I want to get to a better relationship with you, it feels empty because it doesn't feel like someone would actually be ready in that moment to say that to this person about this thing that they just learned.
Yeah, my heart is like beating. My heartbeat just picked up because it reminds me of like abusive relationships I've had where someone's like it feels like in the moment you have to say I forgive you because there's no like the other option would be catastrophic. That's not really how healing works.
Yeah, no, and it's frustrating because I think that giving time for processing and for just like sitting in moments is something that the Life is Strange first 2 seasons, I think it's something that they do really well.
Right.
I was reading this review from Julie Muncie on Fanbyte. She writes this article called "Tell Me Why I Can't Find the Time to Enjoy the Quiet."
Oh,
And
yes.
I think she really gets to the heart of what my issue is with it.
Mm.
She writes, instead of punctuating big moments or living between them, these dashes of silence, often spent looking at scenic, frosty Alaska, usually occur before the action. They feel more like a delaying tactic than a means of reflection. This is where the game's focus on siblings, both of whom you control at different points in the story, works against it here. Even the quiet moments are filled with the two of them sharing quips and memories, and while this may be realistic, it also feels overstuffed. There's never a chance for you to simply exist in the lovely space Tell Me Why attempts to bring to life. You are always being told something new, or asked to do something, or pushed toward the next dramatic moment. As a result, so much that would resonate just doesn't.
You know, that reminded me, I think from that same piece, I had observed that, that Don't Nod was certainly trying very hard to do a quote unquote good job with this first playable trans masculine character. And, part of me wonders if it was so much more like on a path on the rails than previous previous games, like the Life is Strange games, because there was this fear on behalf of the developer of handling something the wrong way. It does seem like they were like with that whole FAQ they released, there was a lot of sort of prefacing and disclaimering and content warning, and I think we need more transmedia, period. Like that's just
100%.
Like it's not the job. Of course we wouldn't be having this conversation if we had many other pieces of media to look at and find ourselves in. But I don't know. Did you sort of sense that? Like, did you feel like the quality of the game was affected by this sort of pursuit of, I don't know what to call it, perfectionism when it came to like allyship and fairness? I don't know. I think in general too. I just want to meet like in general. I think writers don't seem to have the confidence to speak on trans stories because so few trans people are ever allowed to be in that room. And I know that like Aiden August Black, who plays Tyler, that he contributed to the formation of his role and gave feedback. But also there should be entire teams of people consulting like that. Anyway, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that I think that could certainly be part of it. I've heard the game described as a bit toothless, and I think that's true. And I don't think it's exclusive to the way they're handling the trans aspects of the story. I don't think it's exclusive to the way they're handling Tyler's character. There's, like I said, I'm not going to get into all of the details, but there's some very heavy revelations that the twins have about their past, and they're both struggling with it in very real and different ways and for very different reasons. And it just doesn't feel like we get to sit in that long enough to feel like it matters. And then, like, again, I'm not going to spoil the details of what happens, but the end of the game, you're given an experience that's meant to feel cathartic and just feels empty because I didn't get to, there's no room for catharsis. I didn't get to process anything that just happened. It was bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Here's all these revelations. And now we're okay. And you can have this moment of catharsis at the end of the game to reflect. And even in that moment of reflection, they're still doing what Julie alluded to in her article, which is that they'll give you, oh, here's a bench, go sit and just look at the Alaskan wildlife. And you sit down and immediately Allison, the sister, starts talking in Tyler's head through the voice. And it's like, I can't even have a fucking moment of peace and quiet to think about everything that just happened.
Yeah.
And so I guess I couldn't put my finger exactly on why they told the story this way. Usually their seasons are 5 episodes. This is 3. Why did they keep it to 3? What were they afraid of doing if they had stretched that out, if they had given more breadth to it? And then, yeah, maybe that does tie back to a fear of being able to tell a more complex narrative around these characters and wanting to just keep it moving and not letting us sit in anything. I don't know. Maybe it has to do with them getting bought by Microsoft and there was some incentive for them to only do 3 episodes. I don't know what it is, you know, and the Life is Strange games, the first 2 seasons, sometimes the stretch to the 5 episodes felt bloated too. They'd end up adding a lot more melodrama to the story to keep episode 4 interesting. So these games have never been perfect, and this one certainly isn't either. I do still think it's worth people's time, especially with you being able to get it so cheaply through Game Pass. I think it's worth playing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, you know, the characters that they're centering here and just that it exists in the AAA space. But yeah, I was just kind of left wondering, like, what are the ramifications of this story? What are the ramifications of the decisions I made? What are the ramifications on the characters? They ultimately don't seem too impacted by everything that happened. And it's not that I needed anything huge or dramatic to happen, but it just, I feel like I was left wanting to actually feel the catharsis that they thought they were giving me. So moving on from that, we do have a really interesting interview today.
And now for something completely different.
Yeah, now for something completely different. Today's interview is with Dillon Yruegas. Dillon is a theater maker. He works for HowlRound Theater Commons. We were especially interested to talk to Dillon because he does something really interesting as a performer. He actually streams games, dating sims specifically, and performs the characters in the dating sim. And so we got to have a really cool conversation with him about how he feels about gaming and gaming culture, whether or not he identifies as a gamer, and what he's ultimately getting out of these performance opportunities.
Yeah, and I really love talking to Dillon just as someone who devises theater and who's also working to sort of imagine what the future of theater looks like in this post-pandemic world. Like, I thought that it was really cool to sort of talk about how close, at least in my opinion, like video gaming and theater creation are, just in terms of they're both these very experiential, unique experiences that in many cases can't be exactly recreated. And what does it mean to sort of interact with that? And I love the way that we sort of, that he talked about his relationship with games. And I think too that, you know, these digital art forms are just becoming more and more commonplace. And I thought he had some great perspectives to share. So yeah, I'm excited to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, so without further ado, here's our interview with Dillon Yruegas.
Dillon, welcome. Thank you so much for being in the virtual studio with us.
Yes, this is fantastic. I'm loving this virtual studio that we've created.
And before we start, you know, talking about games and what brought us here, I'd love if you might want to take a few seconds to introduce yourself.
Yeah, totally. So my name is Dillon Yruegas. My pronouns are he, him, his, or él si hablas español. I am originally from the Central Texas area, but I am currently living it up in Roslindale, in Boston. Yep. Yeah, and I'm a theater maker by trade. I work for HowlRound Theater Commons, and I do a lot of like different freelancing stuff, like acting, directing, kind of venturing into playwriting, which is cool. You know, super fancy.
That makes sense considering the games you've chosen. to talk to us
Doesn't
about
it though?
today.
Doesn't it though? It's like, oh, it all runs together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been living in the Northeast for about a year and a half now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of performance, you are a theater maker, and you do something really cool with streaming. So I've checked out your Twitch. You have a really cool channel called, is it Boys with Brains? Is that the way to say it?
Yes.
Okay, Boys with Brains. And what you do is you sort of take, so you're working with otome games, like visual novel based dating sim type games, Hatoful Boyfriend, where you're a young woman in a post-apocalyptic world dating a bunch of birds.
Casual,
Casual, as one does.
Normal shit.
Can you tell us more about how you're sort of using these games to create these experimental performances almost with your channel?
Wow, you're making it sound so much more cooler than it actually is.
No, come on. It's pretty cool.
Would literally, like, I could probably sum it down. It's like one thing. I was like, I was bored and I did it.
Isn't that how all good things come to be, though?
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. So I think I guess I'll go back to like a little bit of like history of like how it started and kind of get into what I'm doing now. So one of my good dudes, my friend Dr. Jesse O'Rear now. I have to plug that in because he just got his approval.
Yes.
He's officially a doctor now.
Congrats.
Yes, congrats to him. So he, who I want to say like 3 years ago or so, started playing Dream Daddy. Mm-hmm. And he decided to start live streaming it. And it was one of the major hurricanes that happened in Central Texas that year. So it was like lots of flooding, like nobody was going anywhere. Very similar to how the pandemic started.
Yes.
And so
dark and stormy night.
Yes, dark and stormy nights. So he was just like live streaming it, and he was like essentially creating it kind of like a similar to like an audio drama. Where he was just like doing all the voices and stuff like that. And I was like, this is really fun. Like I actually like enjoyed playing that. And so then fast forward and now to when pandemic hit, I was like, okay, I'm not doing any theater. Thankfully I had my full-time day job, so like I could actually, support myself. Very thankful for that. But I was like, I need to be creative somehow. I've done this before. Like I've seen these things happen before where like, watching people play, it's even like on Twitch and things like that, but having more fun with it because, actor. It's acting. I have a degree in it. It's fine. This is what that all of that thousands of dollars have paid for.
Exactly.
Me performing on Twitch.
At a doctorate level, mind you, with your co-host.
Yes, with my friend. So I just kind of started doing this like very similar things where I just hopped on Facebook Live and started just playing Dream Daddy, doing the silly voices, going all the way through, and like there's the interactive part of it makes it like another form of theater for me, where it just kind of creates that creates the interaction between everybody, and so the audience, and like they can even like with those kind of games, like they help kind of steward like the directions of going. Okay, like because when you get to the screens where you have choices, it's like, okay, like I know what I want to choose. What do you guys want to choose? So it's kind of, it helps in that way to kind of create more of a performance out of it.
Like an improv almost, like you're almost sort of depending on what kind of prompt the audience will give you. That's really interesting. I think too, like something that's really cool about these games is, they are entirely text-based and there are images there, but really it's on the imagination of the player to, create the voices of who they're looking at, as well as craft a narrative that feels true to them. So I think that you really can make it something original with your own acting, because no one else's mind is going to recreate the game in the same way that you did with your recording. What's the reception been like to folks who have watched your streams?
Pretty fun. And like it's a lot of silly things. It's like mostly a bunch of my friends. I want to say like maybe the most I had on one stream was like 20 to 30 people. Like it wasn't. I know, like woo, so many people watching the streams. It's just been really good to see how people interact. I think that's my biggest thing that I always think of. But I will say that it led to kind of a really cool opportunity that my friend Jesse and I were able to do. So we actually created Boys with Brains because we were asked to participate in a thing called Downtown Variety. So Culture Hub New York City, in partnership with La Mama in New York, during pandemic times when they started, they were also kind of going into the whole, like, what are we going to do for performance? Like, how will we get people to interact and things like that? Yeah. Do live theater, but online. Like, what does that mean? And so they did a version of their variety show called Downtown Variety and just transferred it online. And then so we were approached by them of like, hey, would you all like to be a part of one of our variety shows? And thus the Boys with Brains were born. Yeah, and with that is when we specifically played Hatoful Boyfriend and live streamed it that way, which was also live streamed through my work. So that was like a really interesting intersection. Yeah.
Like, so part of the reason this podcast exists is because like I'm a trans person of mixed Filipinx and Irish descent. I'm non-binary. I've played games my entire life. But when I look in the media, I mean, I don't see myself reflected in like the people talking about games or in the games themselves. And so just like having conversations with other trans people about games is so much different than having a conversation with another cis person about a game. Because when I'm playing a game, I'm bringing all of my experience to that character, and I look for trans narratives in games because they're not there for me. And when I talk to other queer and trans people about games, we have these incredibly imaginative conversations, these conversations that take what little we're given and create even deeper worlds out of them. Now we're at a point where we're getting some trans representation in gaming, but I think that there's something really, really special. And you didn't explicitly say if everyone on the stream was like trans, but I'm going to assume that there were other folks there who, you know, shared queer identity. And I think that in itself, like QTPOC joy, QTPOC hanging out, QTPOC just like shooting the shit on a stream, like that's kind of revolutionary considering the fact that so much of the gaming community is so hateful and exclusive to people like us. Like, I don't know, what do you think about the sort of fandom surrounding video games?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I've definitely tried to separate myself from it. Like, I in no ways consider myself a gamer. Like, that is not an identity that I adopt. And I kind of like jokingly, and it's a little harsh, so sorry about that. But
no,
like,
don't be sorry.
But like, there's like, I've definitely joked in the past that it was like, oh, like cishats like really want an identity so badly, and they like just create these like random ones based on what they like to do. And so like, and being a gamer is like very, very similar to that. Whereas like, if you actually do have like all these other marginalized identities, then gaming is just something that you can do for fun as an outlet away from the life that you're living. So like, yeah, like so I never considered myself a gamer because I never was like intentionally in those spaces with like cishet folks. And actually, like, interesting enough, like, that reminds me. So I did a play reading for specifically for Zoom. It was based on the Decameron series, which was back in, I want to say, the Renaissance era. They did. It was a set of plays around one of the times of the major pandemics then. And so they updated it and they called it the COVID Decameron series. But the one that I was a part of was a short play called Gamers, and it was making fun of that, like, gaming like lifestyle and like the way that people talk back and forth to each other. And so it was actually like really hard. I don't want to say really hard, but it was rather hard for me to like get into that mindset. I was like, wow, I'm playing like one of those douchey cishet bro gamers, and I don't
Can't relate.
Can't relate. Can't at all. Like, not here for it at all.
No, that is really fascinating. I love what you said. It reminds me of a tweet that I saw a couple weeks ago about how like it was talking about how in the absence of culture that you experience with whiteness, like there is no white culture. What you end up doing is adopting symbols of consumerism and capitalism and making that your culture. And so when looters are burning down a Chili's, it feels like your family heirlooms are being destroyed. And I think
Yo, but for real though.
And I do feel like, you know, applying that same framework to this idea of what does it mean to be a capital G gamer when that culture has been defined by like who's the loudest, who's the trollingest, who's the best at shooting, who's the best at like putting other people down. Like you can very easily adopt that as a sort of like machismo or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can very easily see that. Love that take, Dillon.
Hot take.
So yeah, what is your history with gaming? You said you didn't identify as a gamer, and I'd love to hear you say more about that if you have any more thoughts. But what's your history with games? How did you, as someone who does not identify as a gamer, how did you get into games?
So I say that I'm not a gamer, and then when I actually like look at my history, I was like, oh, I've been playing games pretty much my entire life.
That resonates.
Like the first system that I can remember having and like specifically asking for was the Game Boy system. And I had the old like big gray brick like Game Boy. That was my first thing that I had. I actually still have it to this day.
It's a relic.
It really is, and it like kind of
might be worth them.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't, unfortunately, like the screen is kind of janky.
But the emotional value is more than the commercial value anyway.
Oh yeah, that's so true. I could probably get something for the games themselves because they definitely still work. I have like Mortal Kombat 2, Tetris, Kirby Dream Land, Super Mario Brothers, like all those like original Nintendo games. Like that's what I had. Yeah. And I want to say I was like 7 or so when I got that. Like I was relatively young. So that was my first game experience. And then I also had both PlayStation 1 and 2. Nice. Those came out when I was like in around like middle school, high school.
Formative years.
So formative, and I'm also aging myself so much right now. I know.
No one Google when the PlayStation came out.
Like, it's fine. Let's do it. And I might have played the first Harry Potter. It's fine.
Yes. I still remember those.
With those horrible graphics, but they were so cool.
We thought they were good at the time.
Oh yeah, we sure did. And then when Guitar Hero came out, I think I was in college at that point. So that was like the big like college party game that you did all together. Like especially if you weren't going to do like Flip Cup or beer pong or any of those, like you played Guitar Hero.
Your time to shine.
Yes, exactly. And even like the Guitar Hero was just the one guitar. Like you couldn't even have like the rest of the band yet. Like that was the thing. And I want to say I was in college when Wii came out. So I had one of those, like the first iteration of a Wii, which was fun. Like I definitely played like the sports games and stuff like that.
Yeah, Wii's like the casual pickup console, right?
It's like, I feel like playing a little tennis today. But it's a little dreary outside, so I'll just pick up the Wii.
The Wii is the console that like my grandmother went out and bought for herself.
Yes.
Like,
totally.
Casual gamers.
Absolutely. I think at least for me, from what I remember, like with the Xbox came like the advent of like online gaming, especially with things like Call of Duty and Red Dead Redemption, like all those games. And I actually like wasn't into them. I was like, I'll play them. Like if we have a bunch of friends like together playing it, sure. But like that was not the games that like interested me at all.
What about them was not interesting to you?
Gosh, so many things. I think that was like the I like immediately saw in them the like bro gamer culture start to come out of there. And so like dealing with also like I don't want to say like I hated killing people, but it was like a little too much for me. I was just like, this isn't fun. Like
it's not why I'm playing the game.
Exactly, yeah. And also like I think a lot of the times like with what I saw with the people that I was playing with who were playing those games, they were very much like the had a stockpile of guns. We're going out to the shooting range all the time, and we're trying to live out their police and or military fantasies, even though they couldn't be a part of it. I grew up in Texas, like like that. Like those were the kind of people who were playing these games all the time, and so it's just like it was for me. It wasn't necessarily like the games themselves. It was like the culture surrounding the games and the people that I knew who were all playing them.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like a very narrow definition in terms of the heroes of these games. Like, yes, one's in space, and yes, one's in the Old West, and yes, one's in a zombie apocalypse, but the protagonists still look and act very much the same. And so if you don't kind of vibe with that certain type of cis white male individualistic brute force type of heroic archetype, like, or even anti-hero, the type of like, oh, I'm a tragic genius. Like, what other room is left for you to exist in that world? Like, I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily like really. I'd actually say within the past like couple of years where I like actually started getting into gaming again. And I think a lot of it was like my own like internal like judgment of myself of like, well, if I play this game, that I'm like this, like I'm not gonna play Sims because like my ex loves Sims, and so that was like a whole thing. Or like I'm not gonna play like on these platforms because of that. And then like within the past few years, especially like as I'm like now 5 years into my medical transition, I was just like, who gives a fuck? It's for my own joy. So like, why not play some games? It's fine.
Right. You can define what a gamer is.
Exactly.
It's funny when you say like these, the certain types of people you associate with games. Like I think of gaming as a very solitary activity that I do for enjoyment. And it reminded me of sort of how, like cooking is another activity that can be very solitary, sort of calming, relaxing. It's methodical. You're on your own. You're building skills. But when it's sort of taken from being a hobby and elevated into like a mainstream activity, and we start applying these tenets of like masculinity and white supremacy to it in order to make it palatable to a wide audience, because cooking, as you know, is woman's work.
Unless you want to be professional, and then you're a white dude.
And then suddenly it's a sport. Suddenly it's a battle. Suddenly, we're in Cutthroat Kitchen. And it becomes like, in order for it to be acceptable as a hobby, we need to apply this inherent competitiveness to it. We need to apply this inherent, battle, sort of fighting for recognition. Like there's all of this additional crap that we feel like we have to surround it with. And so it's interesting to hear you say that about gaming, because I can certainly see parallels there.
Absolutely.
So you told us that both Hatoful Boyfriend and Dream Daddy were games that had a really big influence on your life. And so I'd love for you to start whichever one you'd like, but maybe tell us a bit about those games.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Dream Daddy, because I'm definitely a little bit more well versed in that. It's just so silly. It's so silly and so gay. Just so gay. And like if those are like the only two ingredients of a game, you're gonna have me like hook, line, and sinker. Like just make it silly, make it gay, done. But yeah, like I particularly love the relatively like streamline of the storyline. Like it's very, very simple. It's not it's it's a click through game. Like it's nothing too crazy, but you can still have fun. And the mini games surprised me every time they come up. Even when I still play to this day, I'm just like, wait, is the mini game coming now? Or wait, is it? Okay, now that's happening. Great, cool. And then also like figuring out how to play the mini game. It's like I click, right? Like that's so silly. But yeah, like I'm definitely a sucker for creating characters and avatars. Like. And that's like one thing that I really loved about Dream Daddy is that you had the option to have your dad be queer and to be trans. And I had like when I saw that, I was like, wait, what? You can put a binder on this kid? What? Like mind blown.
Right.
Yeah.
Representation is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like all the other like fun customizable things you could do with your character, like all the different skin tones, all the different hair colors. The clothes are pretty fabulous. Like I'm like, where can I cop some of these? I want those for my own wardrobe. Thank you. Yeah. So those were like the biggest things that like definitely drew me into it. And then yeah, just like with the playthrough of the game itself, having all these very like distinctive voices, that you could play and like all the different dads, and also just like the silliness of like the dad book. And I actually really do enjoy the character voice acting that they have. They're like very, very simple, silly things that they say in their reactions, but like sometimes I'll like even still quote them to friends or like to my partner. I'll be like, "Sweet man, Chago." He's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." Like, don't remember Hot Dad? Come on. He's like, oh, yeah. I got it now.
Oh, of course. Hot Dad.
Hot Dad. Done.
I think, too, there's something really sweet about how the, like, LGBTQ characters or identities aren't treated as, like, a special storyline or, like, a niche thing. Like, it's just this world is set up that way. Like, folks are queer. Like, you don't really often see queer storylines featured in games without having to sort of be caveated by like, oh, but this queer person's going through a ton of violence, or like, oh, but this queer person is like a villain. Like there's something nice about this world that's just made for people like us. Yeah, absolutely. And like there are definitely times where it kind of like strays a little bit into that area. Obviously with like your first dad, like, I mean, you can choose to say if you like what the gender of your partner was beforehand. But like, obviously they passed away. So like, that's the whole like beginning of like, oh, this is like kind of sad. And then, yeah, with some of the other dads where it's like kind of a queer thing maybe, but it's also like not touched upon. So that's like both like I would say like a very positive thing of like sexuality isn't necessarily defined with all the dads. But also like on the other hand, it definitely like impacts how you play and like where you go to the playthrough and stuff. And then do you all know about the director's cut? Or no,
or like I know it's called the dad director's cut.
Oh yeah, the dad director's cut. Or maybe I'm thinking, oh no, it's the unreleased. They released it for a short period of time, but then they like took it off. But there was like this whole like other side to the Joseph character, and he's the dad who's the youth pastor, and where he's actually like in a cult, and he's like trying to seduce all the other dads to. I don't even remember exactly what it is because like I just remember finding out about this. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago where it was like, wait, they're doing what? And like like when you do the playthrough, especially with what's his name? The single dad who's like Robert, the bad boy. How he likes to go like chasing. Like, he's like, there's weird things that happen in this neighborhood and blah blah. And so like there's a lot of the elements still in the game that are like the weird unsettling things that eventually did lead you to like being trapped by Joseph in his basement, and his children are actually demons. Like,
oh my god,
yeah, it's
there's always some
right?
kind of twist, right?
Oh, but I know that they just decided not to go with that, like in the general release. And I want to say it was like a very, very like limited release that they let you play that, because like it was also like kind of weird, kind of homophobic, like leaned into homophobia with the Joseph character. So they're like, we don't really like this. Like we want to keep it like a little bit more wholesome and like good for like the general audience that we want to have.
Yeah.
But there's still evidence of it out there.
Meanwhile, Hatoful Boyfriend has been described as, one reviewer called it, the most eccentric and incoherent dating simulator of all time. And honestly, I hope to be remembered the same way. Dillon, can you tell us about this riveting game?
They're birds. They're all birds. Everyone is birds. And it's like, and you live in a cave. Like, I think that's like the biggest thing that like is unanswered in the entire thing, that I'm like, we're the only human and we live in a cave. And we eat like this weird, like I think it's like a nutritional stick or whatever it was, instead of like seeds. I'm like, what? And there's also like very weird to like, how the birds will talk about the human and be like, your hunter-gatherer instincts. Like, what?
Yeah, so like for folks who may not know, like the premise of the game is basically like the strain of the H1N1 bird flu virus has swept the world. Humans have been wiped out, and in an attempt to save the human race, they tried to transfer like human brains into bird bodies who would be resilient to the virus. And so now we're in a world where humans have been mostly wiped out, birds have taken over as the dominant species, and humans that are surviving have been relegated to their sort of prehistoric vibing hang times of sort of looking for food, hanging out in caves, and trying not to get eaten. And our hero finds themselves in the prestigious bird school. And I'd love to hear more about, like we talked about the joy and fun that these games bring. What makes them sort of stand out to you as being these really meaningful games to you as well? Like what has their impact on you been?
It's just really been fun to perform them. I think that like the characters are just silly. They're just fun, and you get to do voice acting, and like everything is there for you, so you don't have to create anything. Like I don't have to go out and write my own stuff. I'm just like, here we go, let's do it, done. And also like I know several playwrights who also like their day job is writing games for gameplay and stuff like that. So like I know like you can tell when you have like the good games that have good writers behind them, because you can actually like go through these, as ridiculous as they can be, like all these different story arcs, and have fun with that. So it's just, yeah, for me, it's really like another way to have my creativity, my performativity out there in just like such an easy and like accessible way.
I think it's really interesting. Like you are a theater maker, working on a national scale with HowlRound, and something that you have been talking about is, what does theater making look like in a post-pandemic world, in a digital world? It seems like you've already been sort of exploring that with how you're playing these games. Like, what is it like thinking about the future of theater? Like, how are you thinking about that kind of digital connection?
For me, I think a lot of people get stuck on, oh well, pandemic theater is Zoom theater, and that's all that it is. And I think yes, like that was the thing that popped up first, and that was the most easily accessible form of theater that came up. But it's also been like around for a while. There is a conference that happens in Kingston, Ontario, called Folda Fest, Festival of Live Digital Art. Yes.
Nice.
And so yeah, they like their bread and butter is just like how we incorporate digital arts and into live performance. Like one of my favorite ones was a Minecraft one, where it's these kids, like little kids. I'm talking about like 10, 11, 12-year-olds who are on stage and they are creating the world as they're sitting there. But you have these like 3 actors who are also playing on Minecraft. But there is like a storyline that they're doing, and you can watch everything happening on the screen above their heads. So you're watching everybody like create the world and going in through their script, but you're also like the characters of like who you're supposed to like watch is on the screen behind them. So that's like one way that I've seen it kind of integrated in. And then another one that I saw, I don't remember the name. But it's essentially, so the idea behind it is that this woman wanted to create a show that could be toured, but that she did not have to tour herself, so she could have a lower carbon footprint. And
Cool.
so what happens is that they find a local actor to do it. They give them a packet and a script that has it has the script and it has a video, and they only have it, I want to say, for like 3 days or something like that, before they perform it live in front of an audience. And so you have on one side, you have a screen, a projection of whatever the storyline is that she wants to go through. And then on the other screen, you have the actor who's in front of a green screen, and they're being videoed so that their images will show up on the other screen that you're also watching. So it incorporates like all that kind of like live video transferring and a little bit of improv too, because there are blanks in the script that like they don't know, and so they'll have to answer whatever questions are being asked of them in real time. So I think like digital theater is already happening, and there are lots of different ways that it's being incorporated. So it's not just necessarily like Zoom pandemic theater,
Right.
Anymore. And so, but also like even then, like some of the things that people are doing on Zoom, it's really, really cool. Like there's one person who created an opera on Zoom, because like the big thing was always about like the music and how there's a lag and like you can't ever do anything like in real time. And she found ways around that, so that you could like actually like listen to a live stream of an opera in real time, and it actually was like seamlessly happening. So like, yeah, like it's all these like different innovations that are happening, and I think I'm actually like really, really super excited and stoked about it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the definition of theater, like even the things that you just described, like I feel like they share threads with what you do with Twitch and streaming, like all of these walls between what types of art or creation are, and like what, like I think this idea that inherently something deteriorates in value because it's streamed, like we clearly see with the popularity of video and of streamers and of podcasts, like that's very clearly not true. Like audio can be a very rich and video can be a very rich experience. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting time to be in theater.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, that just brought up another thing of audio dramas. Like we're starting to see like a real renaissance in audio dramas because of podcasting, and and I think that's also like just another way for people to really think creatively in how to create new theater, because audio drama is another form of theater, just using a completely different medium, and it's so cool. It's so cool.
So cool. Dillon, before you go, we'd love to know what you're up to and where folks can find you.
Totally. I am not up to much. I say that and then I'm like doing like 5 million things.
Right.
But as far as this goes, I just got a fancy new mic. So I'm gonna do some new live streams soon of me playing Dream Daddy and maybe Hatoful boyfriend. So you can find me on, if you want to follow my personal stuff, on pretty much all the social medias and Twitch, just at Dillon Yruegas, so at DILLONYRUEGAS. And then I'm also part of a collective with me and my good friend Jesse, and we are Boys with Brains. If you look up on, it's everything. It's Boys with Brains. I think on Instagram it's Boys with B Brains, because Boys with Brains was already taken, so we added in an extra B.
How dare they?
It's fine. That's where you can find me.
Yay! Well, thank you so much, Dillon. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. This is great.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you enjoyed this episode, we would very much appreciate it if you could rate us and review us on your podcast application of choice. It makes a world of difference for a little baby podcast like us. If you want to reach out to us, maybe you've got a great story about a game that changed you, a guest recommendation, a question, or even just a comment for us, whatever it is, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us by email at pixeltherapypod@gmail.com. And hey, who knows? If you write us something interesting, we may just have to read it on the show sometime. You can stay up to date on all things Pixel Therapy, like announcements of upcoming guests, clips of unreleased episodes, and whatever else tickles our fancies by following us on social media at Pixel Therapy Pod or visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com. Spencer?
Hello, I am here to present you with this week's side quest. Our side quests are opportunities for you to get involved either in your local community or on a national scale. Just think of them as ideas. And this week, we wanted to talk to you about the Okra Project. And you can find them online at www.theokraproject.com, and that's TheOkraProject.com. And the Okra Project is a really awesome collective. They are based in New York City, but they're operating totally online right now. And they were founded to address, this global crisis faced by Black trans people by bringing them home-cooked, healthy, and culturally resonant meals and resources to Black trans people wherever they can be reached. They are called the Okra Project because Black diasporic cooking often includes the usage of the okra plant for its versatility and its association with health, prosperity, and community. In this spirit, the Okra Project is really bringing free, nourishing meals to folks who are experiencing food insecurity. And food is really a foundation of survival. So this is really necessary, beautiful work. Before the pandemic, they would actually have Black trans chefs go into the homes of other Black trans folks and cook for them. And it was something that brought community as well as nourishment. It's a really cool project. Something else that the Okra Project has been focused on recently is, they have not turned a blind eye to the murders of Nina Pop, of Tony McDade, and so many more Black trans people just this year. They recognize that our Black trans siblings are really feeling the weight of their siblings being murdered. And while these murderers are walking free, or the police just doesn't even care to investigate it. So what the Okra Project is doing is they've set up the Nina Pop Mental Health Recovery Fund, as well as the Tony McDade Mental Health Recovery Fund. And these are emergency mutual aid funds where folks can basically donate the cost of a mental health therapy session to a Black trans person who would otherwise not be able to access it. And that's so that these folks are able to access a safe place to process and heal and cope with the emotional stress of what's going on in the United States in terms of, the continued violence that's brought against Black and brown folks and the unchecked, police presence that is just running rampant and destroying our communities. You can give monetary support to sustain this work. And you can also, if you are someone who has a scheduled session with a Black mental health therapist, you can literally donate that session. To find out more, visit theocreproject.com and read about this really, really cool and necessary organization.
Yeah. Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. We certainly believe in the importance of therapy on this podcast. All right. Well, that's our show for you today, folks. We hope you'll go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more pixel therapy.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.